Hey, this is Brian.
And Shelby.
And you're listening to the Hyperspace
Pod Blast. Aren't you a little short for a podcast?
Huh? Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Hyperspace Pod Blast Masterpiece Theater 3000.
Masterpiece Theater 3000. All right,
so this is the Hyperspace Pod Blast Last Shot Chapter Chats Part 1, featuring, in no particular order except the one that Skype randomly assigned. Go ahead and say your name.
Oh, that's me. Hi, I'm Amy Rickow, and I run the 365 Days of Women Star Wars project I'm doing this year, and I contribute to the official Star Wars site and fangirl blog.
Awesome. Where can people find you and that project?
They can find me Twitter at Amy Rickow, or easier to spell, hashtag 365 Star Wars Women.
Very cool. And next in line, we have none other than...
Jorgie. I have no way to follow up Amy's introduction. I just have a Twitter page at SW_rules.
Right on. And last but certainly not least...
Hi, I'm Jess Hagen, and if you wanted to, you could find me on Twitter. I'm at Ozarks_Jess.
Excellent. So that is our very own last shot team here at Hyperspace Pod Blast. So basically what we're going to do here is talk a little bit about the Last Shot novel. If you haven't read it completely yet, we're only going up to the first 90 pages, the Part 1 section. Feel free to listen if you're at least that far. If you haven't started, feel free to go to audibletrial.com/hyperspace, get yourself a free copy, catch up, and come back. Jumping right in, starting with Amy, what do you think of the assumed prior knowledge of the characters in the novel? Does it do enough to characterize them for unfamiliar readers, or does it lean too hard on knowing them from the films, etc.?
Well, I think it's interesting to think of like who is reading this book who doesn't know who these people are already. I mean, at least like Han, Leia, and and Lando. I'm not sure if like there are a lot of people who are picking up this book that don't know who they are and like kind of what has already happened. But I do, and it's hard for me knowing it so well to kind of put myself in their position. But overall, I think that it does, that you could jump in there and not know what's going on. And there's enough little tidbits in there about, what happened in the Battle of Endor and what's been kind of going on that I think that you could jump in and it would be fine.
Yeah, I mostly agree, actually, with the whole amount of background knowledge they fill in. Jorgie, what do you think on the subject?
Yeah, I agree. I think it just states information about them. Like, it tells us that Lando is a former administrator for Cloud City, and that's not really said in episode 5, but he's a leader. So I think if you haven't seen episode 5, you'll know, he used to lead that place. And I think it does a pretty good job characterizing the rest of the characters too.
Excellent. Jess, do you add your voice to the agreement?
I agree for the most part. I mean, any novel, you're going to come into it not knowing potentially something about somebody, and you just figure it out as you go. So there's enough there that if for some reason you picked this up and didn't know who these people were, you'd get it figured out.
I agree. The only thing I would say that it's maybe missing is truly understanding. I mean, if you were in a complete bubble of not knowing even what Star Wars was and read this book, I don't think you would get the grasp of Ewoks. So
that's interesting.
I think that's one that you wouldn't truly understand of how primitive they are portrayed and why it's interesting to think of an Ewok as a slicer.
That's a good point. Actually, my devil's advocate take is when there's some line that says something to the effect of Mon Mothma-ing. And that's kind of like an insider type thing, because even if you've seen the films, you know the big characters, you may remember who Mon Mothma is, but you're like, what's Mon Mothma-ing mean? Is she standing around in a white dress sounding important? Like, I don't understand. That was basically the impetus for me coming up with this question. But I would agree, again, for the most part, that it does enough to bring you up to speed that you can get into the story without being completely lost.
I agree.
And what you said about the Ewoks, I was kind of shocked when they introduced the Slicer, because I didn't really realize that they were like actual beings because of how primitive they're portrayed. So it's really interesting. So I wonder how someone who might have not seen episode 6 what they would think of that.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
I
I
mean, maybe
reckon
it
they
would seem
think
more
it's-
normal.
Yeah, they assume it's just like some kind of alien, I guess. And they're like, I don't know, maybe it's weird. Maybe they're coming at it from the assumption that it's weird for this type of alien to be, in society or something. I don't know. But in general, it's a weird choice, I thought, but interesting enough, I guess.
So, moving on, Amy, what do you think about the characterization of the well-known cinematic characters like Han, Leia, and Lando? Do you think that they line up with the people we know them in the films? The people we know them as?
That was actually the strongest part of the entire book for me, is that I thought that the author just completely nailed Han, Leia, and Lando. And especially so I have finished the book, but I have gone back so I'm only going to talk about the first 90 pages. But especially at the beginning when like all of them are interacting and like Lando comes, into their home, like I just felt like all of the interactions between the different characters was so perfect and was so like brought me right back to the original trilogy and just seemed so believable for who they were. That was the most delightful aspect of the book for me. Like, I don't think that I've read a Star Wars book where I felt like with so many of the characters that I grew up loving that like they seemed like they just talked the way they do in my imagination, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it, actually. It very much felt like a continuation of what would have happened post Return of the Jedi. I think, especially in my opinion, they nailed Leia better than anybody has, maybe ever, because they always lean way more into that political figure, like hitting you over the head with hope and stuff like that. And this one really got her snarkiness that a lot of people, I think, kind of gloss over, but is a really important part.
It got her
part
playful
of her
side, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I thought it was interesting, and I think that it kind of made me want to go back and reread Claudia Gray's books, which I like, the Leia Princess of Alderaan and then Bloodline, like, because both of them, it's been a while, especially Bloodline, it's been a while since I've read them. But I mean, Leia is my favorite character, and so, but like, I thought that the whole like Leia Lando interactions were just completely brilliant. And before we go to somebody else, like, I opened the book up to at the very beginning, there's a line that says Lobot's expression indicated disappointment and ire. And honestly, like, I knew that's like very soon in the book. Like, I knew I was going to love this book as soon as I read that line. I was just like, there's like Lobot, like I could picture it. And like these little moments that like he put in there, like I was completely sold.
Yeah, especially with Lobot, since basically all he does is make expressions. Like, it's nice that they added that kind of detail.
I'm not like some huge Lobot fan, but like, but it was very funny where I was just like, oh my gosh, like this person clearly knows Lobot, like they know these movies, like this is the right person running this book.
Right on. And if you're not a big Lobot fan, I highly recommend reading the Lando comic, and you will be.
I second that.
It's one of, if not the best thing the comics have done so far. But anyway, moving on. Jorgie.
Yeah, I thought the characterization was pretty spot on, especially with Leia and Lando. And one thing, though, is that because it jumps around a lot, like 15 years ago, 10 years ago, sometimes the characterization is a little different, but it's believable because, it's a long time ago. But sometimes when I was reading it, I forgot how long ago it was. And I was thinking this was like the Return of the Jedi Han when it wasn't. But I think it was pretty good. It was pretty spot on for me.
Excellent. And we'll get to that time jumping situation here in just a minute. But Jess, what do you have to add to this?
Yeah, I'm just going to chime in and say, like, I instantly was hearing their voices, the actors' voices in my head reading it, which I don't always am able to do when I'm reading Star Wars books, but it just was so spot on that I was hearing them, like, from the get-go.
Brian's giving like huge thumbs up right now.
That was a fantastic point, because I hadn't thought about that, but as you said it, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I did the same thing. But yet when I read, like, I'm going to dog Heir to the Jedi because I do it all the time. When I read that, like, every time Luke spoke, it was like some nasally, pimply-faced kid instead of Luke Skywalker. So, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting that you said that. That is a fantastic point. My mind is somewhat blown.
Nice.
Yeah, I can even see the facial expressions when I read this book. I think I agree with you, Amy, that Leia is just like so Leia in this book in the ways that, and as Brian was saying, we have a lot of people writing stuff that's like lofty Leia.
It's a good way to put it.
But I really enjoy snarky, kind of a more gritty version of Leia, which is the Leia that I always just loved.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, I think that, like, she's always working. You know, she never gets any time off. She never gets to have any, like, really any emotions about anything. Like, she's always just kind of doing her task, and she's so busy with everything that, you know, like, she's human and she has fun, but you don't get to see that a lot. And it was nice. I mean, especially in a book that's not based on her, but like she's in it and she's an important character still in the book, but it's, you know, it's more of a Han and Lando book, obviously. I was really surprised by how much I enjoyed Leia in this book.
Yes, and it's so awesome to see Han in that role of being the strong person for the strongest person when they can't be anymore. When they come home and have to like kind of take that mask off and be more relaxed.
Most deaf. So now to move on to something Jorgie brought up, the back and forth time jumps. Is that something that you thought was good, bad, or ugly, I guess, in as far as a storytelling device?
So overall, I liked it. I had shared before we started recording that when I first started reading this book, I was reading it in like 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, putting it down, picking it up. And like that was a train wreck. Like I almost kind of had to kind of start over because like with the time jumps, like that was then confusing me. Throughout the entire book, like sometimes I thought maybe there was like a few too many time jumps. But when I went back to kind of peruse the first 90 pages, I did not like, and obviously I knew what was going on. So it was like reading it kind of a second time, but like none of that seemed superfluous. Like all of that like worked really, really well. But I would say that if you're someone like me who, you know, sometimes just, you know, puts down books, like picks them up, puts them down and stuff like that, like that did not work for this book. And when I ended up just reading the entire thing and enjoyed it much, much more.
Yeah. So how about you, Jorgie, who's already said that you had somewhat of an issue with it?
I actually like the idea of doing time jumps. I think some books have done it really well, like Rebel Rising by Beth Revis. But what was different with the way that book and this one did their time jumps was that in Last Shot, it's like a heavy plot is kind of going on in each different time zone that it keeps skipping to. Whereas in Rebel Rising, it wasn't too important to remember what was going on in each time for me. So sometimes it was kind of confusing, especially because like Amy, I didn't read it all like at the same time at first. I would read like a chapter and then like go back to it the next day and such. So sometimes it was jarring a little bit, but when I would read a lot in one go, it was kind of okay. But I have a hard time with it usually because I don't have the best memory.
What were you saying? I'm sorry, I don't remember.
Oh, I was done.
That was a joke. Never mind.
I got it, Brian.
Thank you.
Oh. I'm good.
All right, Jess, what do you think?
And I'm like, oh no, this is a joke, right?
That's usually how my jokes land, honestly.
Welcome to my life.
Yeah.
Because it was Brian, I assumed it was a joke, but like the tone of voice, I couldn't tell.
That's the best way.
Like,
just always assume it's a joke with
Yeah,
Brian.
that's
okay,
usually your
I
best
will
bet.
for now.
I did read it all in one setting, so I didn't have very much trouble with the back and forth time jump in and of itself. My issue is like I compulsively need to chart things out like timeline wise. So I had to force myself to just sit there and read the book and not like try to map out what was happening before this and what was going on elsewhere at the same time and just like take it for the ride it was.
I do that too. I just gave up.
Yeah, Shelby's wholeheartedly nodding as well. Yeah, I don't know, not to toot my own horn, but I read a lot, and I didn't have any problem with it at all. It's not my favorite storytelling device, but it didn't really bother me. I will say, like Jorgie, I think, mentioned the fact that it goes like 10 years here, 15 years here, 6 months here, I don't know, like all over the place instead of sort of a straight back and forth was a little more jarring than the usual someone in the present telling a story from the past that will then inform the future type thing. But
Right.
Overall, wasn't an issue for me.
I wouldn't like it if every book was that way, but this is just something different. And so it's kind of nice to have something different.
Yeah.
I'd agree with that. I enjoyed getting the different perspectives because then you're right next to each other comparing Han then to Han now, or Lando then to Lando now. And so it's really nice to put those so close in proximity so that you can really compare them and be like, wow, look at how much all these events that I know of that I've seen in the movie have changed this character. Or events I don't know of yet.
Right,
and
yeah.
it's like, wow, what happened?
Never thought about it like that.
What, isn't the Solo movie supposed to jump around as well? Like, isn't there there are time hops in the movie, like where it's showing Han from, over a time period? Maybe I'm making that up, but that's what I thought.
I think so, but I think it goes linearly. I think we're gonna
maybe, yeah.
Oh, good. I was about to ask.
It's not
if
going to
there's
go
a
like
parallel.
back and forth. I don't believe it's going to be
Yeah,
kind
that
of
makes
like
sense, yeah.
the way Rogue One was, except instead of one giant leap from the beginning, it's going to go in sections. I believe. What we may be wrong. Who knows? We're not
I
insiders.
bet that's fake. I'm sure you're right, Brian.
Yeah, me too.
That's Brian for you.
All right, next question. Did anything about the writing, plot, characterization, etc. take you out of the story at any point? Was there any point where you were reading and, you're in the narrative, you're going along, and then suddenly something's like, what?
I don't really, I did sometimes go back a little bit because I was like, wait a minute, what, where did we leave off? With the whole time thing. But, I don't remember reading anything, especially not in the beginning, that I felt was strange or non-Star Warsy or that doesn't belong. I don't think I have a good example.
Cool. Well, that's good then. If it didn't happen for you, good. Jorgie, what about you?
The only times I was really taken out when it came to characterization was that a few pages had gone by and I forgot it was 15 years ago because, for example, towards the end, it goes back to when Han was at Maz's castle, and he's there all the time, so I forgot that it was 15 years ago. And he said something, and I was like, wait, that doesn't really sound like him, but it was 15 years ago. And then I was like, oh, okay. So it was just me, my head messing with me, mostly, pretty much. It was a bad answer.
No, it's a good answer.
I'm flattered.
Yeah, you're fine. Jess, how about you?
Nothing really. It was more like, oh, there's Condor. That's exciting. Oh, there's Sana Staros. That's exciting. Just a little moment to be excited to recognize a character from a different media, but nothing that really took me out of it in a bad way.
So I know Brian has something he wants to say.
I
don't really have anything myself. I thought everything was pretty spot on. I thought the only thing that was really strange was the meeting with Lando and the veteran that he meets on the park bench. That just I don't know, maybe that's gonna be explained later, who knows. But that for some reason I was like, why is this happening? That was the only thing for me. But Brian, do you want to say your thing? Because I already know what it is.
Yeah. I don't keep my complaints to myself, believe it or not. But yeah, there's one point in the dialogue, I'm pretty sure it's Lando who says it when he's at that big party. He says something to the tune of using the new teenage idiom of saying, I haven't seen you in a minute. And I read that and I was like, wait a minute, am I reading one of my students' papers? Nope, this is still a Star Wars book. That took me out of it because, I don't know, I'm not a big fan of using sort of what I call current dialogue, I guess, in things that aren't current. It'd be like if you read a Star Wars book and someone was like, I can't wait to go to the pod races. Not,
Yeah.
It doesn't hold up. If I read this in 5 years and I read in a minute, I haven't seen you in a minute. I'm like, in a minute? Oh yeah, that's a thing people used to say. I don't know. That bugged me, but that's me being nitpicky. In general, there really wasn't much of a problem.
So finally, wrapping this up, what is your initial impression of the Last Shot crew, who we've been introduced to so far? Who's your favorite, least favorite, and why? Amy?
So my favorite is probably Kasha. I enjoyed her character, and I think that her interactions with Lando and how they had a history and they're kind of reconnecting. I think that Lando kind of meeting his match of a woman that she wants him but she doesn't need him. That's a perfect person for Lando to be interacting with because he is so charming, but he also I like that he likes her because he knows that she's not gonna just hang around waiting for him, that she's a strong woman and she'll just go off and do whatever she wants. But I enjoyed Kasha as a character. I don't know if I really have a least favorite, I mean, there were certain, like, you know, like there was what's his name? Like Florix the Ugnaught. Like, you know, he didn't leave like a huge impression on me, but
Right.
like, you know, I don't have anything against him.
Forgot about him.
In the first 90 pages, like the pilot, have they hired the pilot?
Yes,
The hotshot kid?
the imposter Han
Yes.
Solo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought that character was fine, but like, you know, like I felt like Kasha was much more, you know, I could picture her and imagine her more than the pilot. But so she was my favorite. But there weren't any characters that I found, you know, sometimes in books you're just like, okay, it's like, you know, I'm just going to scan until you stop talking or you go away. Like I didn't find any like really annoying characters in this. Like I thought everyone, you know, some were more memorable than others, but there weren't any stinkers for me.
Right on. How about you, Jorgie?
You know me, I don't like to pick least favorites, but I kind of already forgot about Florix by this point, so probably that character. But my favorite would have to be Kasha, same as Amy. And what was also interesting about Taka was that in the introduction, there's like a all caps thing, like no pilots even talk to me because they know how serious I am, blah, blah, blah. It was just really funny to me.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and jump in. I agree. The imposter Han Solo is probably my favorite character, just because I like that whole gag. That's pretty funny. That seems like something I would do to get noticed. Put on, if I was in a band, I always had this idea that we should call the band Free Beer, so that way the marquee would say tonight only free beer. And then people would come and they'd be really mad when they got there, but they'd be there. So, I mean,
And then they'd fall in love with your band.
exactly. So I can get behind that sort of initial draw and then win them over type of scenario. But anyway, Jess, since you're most important, we save you for last.
Oh, thanks. Well, the imposter Han Solo is probably my least favorite.
Fine, be that
Just
way.
because how dare you come in and pretend to be my Han Solo? You know, I don't dislike, just probably my least favorite. My favorite probably so far is L3. I don't know why we don't have that much from L3, but she just seems like she's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, that would be my like hard second for sure.
Yeah, I'm super intrigued about her character from this book.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think in general, actually, this does a good job of really making me curious about the movie, which I think is kind of part of the point. So well done on that front as well.
Yeah. With
Thumbs
L3,
up.
I feel like I'm going to really like L3 in this book and the movie, so I'm pretty sure she's going to be my favorite character of all time pretty soon. Like everyone
all
else.
time. Yeah, every new character is your favorite character of all time.
Honestly.
I fall hard for droids all the time, so I'm not too surprised.
Yeah.
Well, and that's interesting
Hashtag
because like I'm not
K2SO.
I don't like I like droids, but like I'm not a huge droid person. Like I'm not usually drawn to the droids, and
Right.
like overall, like the droids are incredibly interesting in this book. Like it's like it's like they play a large part in the book, but like every single droid, like the calf droid was hysterical, like with being solo, like and L3 was interesting, and then you know like. I mean, it really, like, it was the best droid stuff. It was the most interesting droid stories that I can remember reading, really. Like, I'm not drawn to them, and I was super drawn to them. So I was like, you know, good job, Daniel.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
they're also different.
Yeah, totally, yeah.
Mhm.
I would say that my favorite character is actually the real Han Solo. Just because I'm really enjoying seeing some really different sides of him in this book, and I think it really captures that. My second favorite actually would be the calf droid. Because
the
I was
calf
reading
droid
this-
is technically not part of the crew, but like
I know.
that's pretty much the part that she talked about the most.
Yeah, I was like, I need this. If there was a droid in my kitchen that told me all of like the origins of all my food, I would be so happy. But I guess my least favorite at this point would probably be the Ewok slicer, just because it just doesn't add up in my head yet. And I'm looking forward to that like being disproven in a way, or just seeing more of that and seeing how awesome they can be. So right now that's my least favorite, but I have a feeling it's going to change.
Yeah, I can, like I said before, it's an odd choice. I think they said it's 2 years or something. And to go from that sort of primitive to being like a good slicer in 2 years, I mean, I can imagine going from being okay with computers to a good slicer in 2 years, maybe. Like, that's even a stretch. So it's hard for me to wrap my head around. I think it's kind of a kitschy choice, but whatever. I'm down. Star Wars, it's not perfect.
Anyway, that's about all the time we have. Thank you guys so much for being part of these chapter chats. We're looking forward to the next 2 installments. And if you all have thoughts on Last Shot, be sure to share them with us on Twitter at hyperspace_pod.
You can email them to us at hyperspacepodblast@gmail.com.
And as always, you can check out all of our content on hyperspacepodblast.com.
And again, if you've not read the book, but you listen to this and you're intrigued, audibletrial.com/hyperspace, 100% free audio version of the book, and a 30-day trial is just waiting for you to jump right in.
All right, we will talk to you guys later. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Yeah, check everyone
Thanks
out.
for
These are
having
great
me.
people. Happy to have them. Happy to listen. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye!
Bye-bye.
Bye.